Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. I've always prided myself on being a devoted husband and a caring father. Yet over time, I've come to realize that my world has slowly been chipped away by the subtle cruelty of the one person I trusted the most, Lauren, my wife. Every evening as I prepared for my night shifts as a firefighter, I'd watch her with a quiet resignation. She'd smile sweetly, assure me that she was watering the garden, and then vanish behind the privacy of our backyard. At first, I dismissed it as nothing more than a harmless routine, a little alone time for her to relax. But as days turned into weeks, her casual departures became a haunting refrain in our lives, leaving me with an inexplicable emptiness. I began noticing that during family gatherings and neighborhood barbecues, Lauren's barbed remarks and dismissive tone seemed targeted not only at others, but subtly at me, as if reminding everyone that my contributions were mere background noise. I'd stand there in my work clothes after a long shift, listening as she recounted stories of her gardening adventures, with an almost theatrical glee, her eyes glinting with a secret I couldn't quite place. "You're just lucky I have some free time to get out," she'd say with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, leaving me feeling small and unworthy of the love we once shared. I tried to shake off the sting, telling myself that a husband's duty was to protect and provide, not to be the subject of ridicule. Yet, each casual comment chipped away at my confidence. One crisp evening at a neighbor's dinner party, as I helped clear the table after a hearty meal, Lauren casually remarked, "Some of us have more exciting lives than others," with a barely concealed smirk that sent a shiver through me. The laughter that followed from our friends was a blow I wasn't prepared for, and I felt the sting of humiliation in the pit of my stomach. Am I really just a supporting character in my own life? I wondered silently, as I watched her bask in the attention and admiration of everyone else. In my quiet moments, as I sat alone in our dimly lit living room, the memories of those barbs would replay in my mind like a broken record, each instance a reminder of the subtle yet relentless emotional abuse I was forced to endure. I questioned my worth, my efforts as a husband and father, and began to wonder if I was merely a prop in the spectacle of her life, a background figure easily dismissed and forgotten. The internal conflict grew with each passing day until I reached a moment of stark clarity during a family reunion. As relatives gathered in the warmth of a backyard under twinkling string lights, I found myself quietly assisting with the setup while Lauren entertained our guests with exaggerated tales of her daily adventures in the garden. When a distant cousin complimented her on her seemingly vibrant social life, she laughed softly and remarked, "Well, some of us have to stay busy while others just watch life pass by," her tone light yet cutting. In that moment, as I stood in the shadow of her performance, a wave of anger and sorrow surged within me. I felt both invisible and exposed, a man whose silent suffering had become the punchline of someone else's joke. I wondered if I should finally speak up, demand the respect I knew I deserved, or continue to bear the quiet torment for the sake of keeping up appearances. The laughter and applause of our guests echoed around me, but inside, a storm was brewing, a growing realization that my sacrifices had been twisted into a source of amusement. As the night wore on and I retreated to a quiet corner of the house, my mind churned with questions. When did my voice become so unimportant? Why had the person I loved chosen to belittle me in public, reducing my contributions to mere footnotes in her narrative? In that silence, as I watched the flickering lights of the gathering dance across the walls, I knew that something deep within me was beginning to change. The pain was palpable, the wounds raw, and I could no longer ignore the mounting evidence that I was living a life defined by my invisibility. My heart whispered, "Enough is enough," and for the first time in years, I began to consider that maybe, just maybe, I deserved to be seen and heard. I arrived at our annual neighborhood barbecue, feeling the heavy burden of recent weeks weighing on me, yet hoping that the familiar warmth of friends and family might offer a brief respite from the inner turmoil I'd been enduring. The sun hung low over the lawn as we gathered around picnic tables and string lights, the air filled with laughter and the mouth-watering aroma of grilled food. I tried to join the conversation and smile at the friendly banter, but even amidst the jovial atmosphere, I could sense an undercurrent of ridicule that seemed to follow me everywhere. Lauren was in fine form that evening, charming everyone with her effortless wit and dazzling smile. But it was clear that every so often, her words would slice right through me. I noticed her playful glances directed my way as she recounted a story about how she'd water the garden. That evening, her tone light and dismissive, as if the phrase concealed a secret only she knew. I felt the familiar sting of humiliation, the cold sweat of embarrassment gathering on my skin as a few of our friends exchanged knowing looks. As the evening wore on, the conversation shifted to our roles at home, and a mutual friend, Mark, remarked, "Jake, it must be tough always playing second fiddle while Lauren handles the exciting stuff." His words, although meant to be playful, landed like a punch to my gut, and the laughter that followed cut deep. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched Lauren smile smugly and add, "Well, someone has to keep the home fires burning while others chase after thrills." I clenched my fists, feeling a growing fire of indignation, while inside, a storm of self-doubt churned relentlessly. I remembered countless evenings when I'd toiled away after long shifts, quietly fixing things around the house and tending to the kids, only to be dismissed as a mere shadow behind her dazzling presence. That night, as the laughter subsided and the soft hum of conversation resumed, I found my resolve crumbling under the weight of accumulated humiliation. I tried to speak up at first, but my voice was lost in the din, and I felt trapped by the fear of rocking the boat. However, as the night deepened, the whispers of mockery grew louder in my mind until I could no longer contain the torrent of emotion inside me. In a moment of uncharacteristic boldness, I stood up abruptly, the scraping of my chair drawing the attention of everyone in the circle. "Lauren, enough!" I bellowed, my voice trembling yet determined, silencing the room. For a heartbeat, time seemed to stand still. Lauren's smile faltered, and the friendly chatter died down to an expectant hush. "What do you mean, Jake?" she demanded, her tone a mixture of surprise and defensiveness. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding as I continued. "I mean, I'm tired of being nothing more than a prop in your elaborate show. I've spent years holding this family together, working long shifts, making sacrifices, only to be reduced to a joke, an invisible supporting actor in the theater of your life." The room fell into a heavy silence, every eye fixed on me, and a murmur of shock rippled among our friends. I could see confusion and sympathy in some faces, while others exchanged uncomfortable glances. "You always act like you're the star," I added, my voice gaining strength with each word. "But all I see is a woman who delights in belittling me in front of everyone, making my efforts seem insignificant. I deserve more than this constant humiliation." Lauren's eyes darted around, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of guilt, but it was quickly replaced by defensiveness. "Jake, you're overreacting," she retorted, her voice rising. "This is just a bit of fun. You always take everything so seriously." Her dismissal ignited something inside me, a surge of anger and a profound sense of injustice that I could no longer ignore. I felt the weight of every overlooked sacrifice, every whispered mockery that had chipped away at my self-worth over the years. Standing there in the silence that followed, I realized that this wasn't just another moment of humiliation. It was a tipping point. In that charged atmosphere, I understood that my silence had been mistaken for strength and my endurance for acceptance. My heart thundered as I declared, "I'm not your punching bag, Lauren. I'm not some background extra in your life. I'm a man who deserves respect, and tonight, I'm done being invisible." As the echoes of my words faded, the room remained suspended in stunned silence, and I knew that nothing would ever be the same. In that moment of raw exposure, I began to see that my identity was slipping away, sacrificed on the altar of your callous amusement, and I was forced to confront the painful truth that our life together was crumbling under the weight of your relentless cruelty. I spent a quiet Saturday afternoon in the house, the weight of recent events still lingering, when I decided to tackle the clutter in the attic, a space I'd long neglected in favor of paying attention to the little details at home. As I moved dusty boxes and old keepsakes aside, my eyes caught a glimpse of something odd. A small, intricately carved wooden box tucked away in a dark corner behind a stack of faded photo albums. My pulse quickened as I carefully pulled it out. I had never seen this box before, and it didn't belong among our old mementos. With trembling hands, I opened it, expecting perhaps forgotten letters or trinkets, but instead found an expensive, sleek watch nestled in a velvet pouch. The watch's design was unmistakably luxurious, a far cry from the simple, practical items that had always characterized our modest life. I turned it over and noticed an engraving on the back, a name I didn't recognize at all. For a long, silent moment, disbelief and shock roiled inside me. My mind raced back to all those evenings when Lauren would casually say she was watering the garden as she slipped out through the backyard gate. The puzzle pieces began to fit together like a cruel mosaic. Each time she disappeared, I'd felt an inexplicable emptiness and a flicker of doubt, but I had brushed it aside, trusting her word. Now, holding this watch, the tangible evidence of a secret that was never meant for me, I felt a surge of betrayal so deep it nearly stole my breath away. "How could you?" I whispered into the silent attic, my voice heavy with a mix of anger and sorrow. I sat down on an old trunk and stared at the watch, the cool metal against my skin igniting every memory of her dismissive laughter and the hushed whispers I'd overheard when she returned with a flushed face. The realization was excruciating. Lauren wasn't just neglecting me emotionally. She had been living a double life right under my nose. Every careless remark and every time she had brushed off my concerns now painted a darker picture, a deliberate strategy to hide her betrayal by dressing it up in mundane excuses. As the shock subsided, I began to feel a simmering anger alongside a profound grief. My thoughts spiraled. Each memory of her secretive behavior felt like another blow, another reminder that I had been reduced to a mere bystander in our shared life. I picked up the watch again, studying the fine details, and with each passing second, my determination grew. I realized that if I were to confront this devastating truth, I needed more than a single piece of evidence. I needed irrefutable proof. I couldn't let my emotions drive me to impulsive actions that might be regretted later. I resolved, then and there, that I would gather every shred of evidence, every clue that confirmed what my heart already knew. My next steps were clear. I would discreetly install additional monitoring equipment in the backyard, maybe a small camera hidden near the gate or by the shed where she supposedly met her secret lover. I recalled the subtle signs that had haunted me for months. The neighbor always mowing his lawn precisely when I left for my night shifts, the way Lauren's eyes would flicker with guilt whenever she mentioned watering the garden. Now, with the watch in hand, it was all laid bare. I scribbled notes in my journal, recording the exact time and place of the discovery, the look on my face, and every emotion that surged through me. "I will uncover every secret," I wrote, my pen scratching fiercely on paper. No more silent suffering. I knew that confronting her now, without irrefutable proof, would only give her the chance to twist the narrative and blame me for overreacting. I needed to be patient, to let the truth accumulate until it could no longer be ignored. The heavy silence of the attic was broken only by the soft rustle of paper and the beating of my heart as I sat there, grappling with the enormity of what I had found. I felt as if the ground beneath me had shifted, and I was standing on the precipice of a new, uncertain future, one where I would no longer be the silent, invisible husband, but a man determined to reclaim his dignity and demand the respect I had long been denied. With a final, resolute glance at the engraved watch, I closed the box gently, sealing away the evidence that had shattered my illusions. I knew that my life was about to change forever, and as I left the attic, I carried with me the resolve to uncover every hidden truth, no matter how painful it might be. In the days following that crushing discovery, I transformed from a silent, hurting husband into a man determined to reclaim my dignity and expose the lies that had poisoned our home. Every moment I had spent feeling invisible and devalued now fueled a plan. A meticulously crafted scheme that would reveal the truth about Lauren's secret life. I knew I couldn't confront her without irrefutable proof, so I decided to turn her own deceptions against her. My first step was to replace the expensive gift I had found in the attic, a luxurious watch engraved with a name I did not recognize, with a fake, a replica that I had painstakingly ordered online. I spent long nights comparing photos, ensuring every detail was replicated flawlessly, so that if she ever searched for it, the counterfeit would pass as genuine. I rehearsed the exchange in my mind over and over. I would casually mention needing to clean up the storage area and slip the fake in its place without arousing suspicion. It's the small details that add up. I muttered to myself one evening as I examined the watch under a bright desk lamp, my hand steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. Once the replacement was completed, my focus shifted to gathering undeniable evidence of her infidelity. I had noticed over the past several weeks that every time I left for my night shifts as a firefighter, the neighbor from 2 doors down would mow his lawn, a coincidence too consistent to ignore. My suspicions had been confirmed by the hushed whispers and sideways glances in the neighborhood, but I needed concrete proof. I decided to install motion-triggered floodlights and cameras in our backyard, aimed precisely at the fence gate that Lauren used to slip out. I spent one chilly evening driving to a local hardware store, the winter wind biting at my cheeks as I purchased the equipment, small, discreet cameras, and a set of powerful LED floodlights that could illuminate even the darkest corners. Back at home, I set to work under the cover of night, carefully mounting the devices so they would blend in with the surroundings. Every step was executed with the precision of someone who had nothing left to lose, each click of the drill and every adjustment of the camera angle a calculated act of defiance. "This will be the turning point," I whispered, tightening the final screw with a determined glint in my eye. With the technical setup complete, I spent the next few days monitoring the system from my phone, watching as the motion sensors recorded every movement near the gate. The data confirmed my worst fears. Each time Lauren claimed she was watering the garden, the cameras captured her slipping out through the fence gate and meeting the neighbor by the backyard shed. The evidence was irrefutable, and yet the final act of my plan was still in the works. I knew the moment of truth had to be orchestrated perfectly. It needed to be public enough to shatter the illusions Lauren had built, yet executed with the precision that would leave no room for her to twist the narrative. I rehearsed the scene in my mind. The next Super Bowl party at Kyle's house, where everyone expected an ordinary night of camaraderie and football. I would wait until halftime. Then, at the precise moment when Lauren would once again disappear under the guise of watering the garden, the motion sensor would trigger the floodlights and cameras. In that split second, as the bright lights flooded the backyard and captured every incriminating detail, the evidence of her betrayal would be laid bare before the shocked eyes of our neighbors and friends. My heart pounded as I envisioned the scene, a tableau of humiliation in which Lauren's carefully maintained secret would be exposed for all to see. I made sure my phone was fully charged and connected to the camera system, ready to stream the damning footage directly to the big screen in the living room. "This is for every moment I was made to feel less than a man," I said softly, more to myself than anyone else, as I double-checked the settings on the device. Each test run increased my determination. The images were clear, the timing precise, and the truth unavoidable. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, sorrow, and a deep, unyielding resolve that now defined me. I knew that once the night came, there would be no turning back. The floodlights would expose not only Lauren's betrayal, but also the years I had endured her emotional abuse without protest. In that final moment before the plan would come to fruition, I sat quietly in the darkness of my study, watching the live feed from the cameras on my phone, each flicker of movement affirming the reality I had feared for so long. "Soon, everything will be revealed," I whispered, my voice steady despite the tumult inside. With every detail in place and every piece of evidence accounted for, I was ready to confront a future where my silence was no longer an option and where my actions would finally set me free. The day of reckoning arrived unexpectedly clear, the sky above our modest home an indifferent blue as I waited in the stillness of our front porch. I had spent weeks planning this moment, each second of mounting evidence and seething pain crystallized into a single, inescapable truth. That evening, as I left for my night shift at the station, my heart beat with a mixture of resolve and sorrow, knowing that tonight would finally expose the secret that had gnawed at me for far too long. Lauren, with her habitual nonchalance, had once again claimed she was watering the garden, a phrase that had become a hollow excuse masking her clandestine trysts with a neighbor from 2 doors down. I watched through the security feed on my phone as she slipped through the backyard gate, unaware that every step she took was being recorded by the motion-triggered cameras and monitored by the floodlights I had so painstakingly installed. In the dim light of our backyard, the sensors detected her movement, and, as if on cue, the giant floodlights burst into life, illuminating the shed and revealing a sight that made my blood boil. There, half-naked and caught entirely off guard, was Lauren with our neighbor, their secret rendezvous exposed in vivid detail for anyone to see. I stood transfixed on my porch, the images seared into my eyes as I heard the murmur of shocked voices from neighbors peeking out of their windows. A moment of stunned silence reigned before a ripple of incredulous laughter broke out in the street. "Guess I don't need to take out the trash. Looks like she already took herself out," I called out, my voice echoing across the quiet suburban block as I turned to face the growing crowd. My words, sharp and laced with bitter triumph, reverberated through the neighborhood as neighbors exchanged glances that mixed sympathy with a sense of righteous vindication. Lauren froze in place, her face draining of color, and for a few agonizing seconds, time itself seemed to hold its breath. I stepped off the porch slowly, each stride heavy with the weight of years spent enduring humiliation and unspoken pain. "Lauren, this ends now," I declared in a voice that managed to be both cold and resolute despite the tumult within me. Her eyes met mine, pleading for mercy that I no longer had to offer. The neighbor, equally shocked, tried to retreat, but the commotion had drawn the attention of more than just our immediate circle. I could see that the fabric of our once quiet community was tearing apart, a web of deceit unraveling in public view. "I trusted you," I said, barely above a whisper, yet my words carried the force of every silent year I'd spent questioning my worth. "I gave everything to hold this family together, and you chose to betray that trust." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a mix of scorn and sympathy for the fallout unfolding before their eyes. In that charged atmosphere, Lauren opened her mouth as if to speak, to justify the unspeakable, but no words emerged. Instead, the reality of her actions hung in the air like a dark cloud, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. I turned away from her, my heart pounding with a tumult of emotions: anger, sorrow, and an unexpected relief that the facade had finally crumbled. As I walked back to the porch, I could feel the eyes of the neighborhood upon me, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight of my silence lifted. I had taken a stand, and though the scars would remain, I knew that tonight marked the end of an era of betrayal. With a final, resolute glance at the chaos behind me, I stepped into the night, my mind already envisioning a future where I could rebuild a life defined not by deception, but by the hard-won truth of my own worth. I returned home in a daze after that unforgettable night. Every step toward our front door weighted with conflicting emotions. The bitter taste of public humiliation still clung to me as I fumbled with my keys, my mind a jumble of anger, sorrow, and a tentative sense of liberation. Inside, the silence of our house was oppressive, a stark contrast to the chaos outside, and I sank onto the worn sofa, trying to process the magnitude of what had just occurred. Minutes later, the front door swung open and Lauren appeared, her eyes burning with a mix of fury and desperation. She strode into the living room as if on a mission, her voice quivering as she launched into a tirade. "Jake, what do you think you're doing?" she demanded, her tone sharp and accusatory. I took a steadying breath, meeting her gaze with a newfound resolve. I'm doing what I should have done a long time ago, I replied, my voice firm despite the tumult inside me. I'm finally standing up for myself. Lauren's face twisted in disbelief, and she stepped closer, her hands gesturing wildly as if trying to regain control of the situation. Standing up for yourself? You've made a huge mistake, she spat. You think exposing me at the party was justified? It wasn't fair to our family. Her words, though frantic, sounded hollow compared to the weight of the evidence that had shattered our lives. Fair, I interrupted, my tone growing cold. All I ever asked for was respect. I've supported this family through endless night shifts and countless sacrifices, yet you've belittled every effort I've made. You chose to hide behind excuses, to pretend you were watering the garden while you betrayed our trust. Her eyes flashed with anger, and she tried to twist the narrative. You're being ridiculous, Jake. You always blow things out of proportion. Maybe if you weren't so insecure, you wouldn't have to act like a hero, she sneered, attempting to gaslight me. I felt every word as a punch to the gut, but the strength I'd found in exposing your betrayal kept me grounded. I'm not insecure, Lauren. I'm tired of feeling invisible, of watching you dismiss everything I do. I've had enough of your lies, I said, each word deliberate and resolute. The tension in the room thickened as she took a step forward, desperation edging into her voice. Think about the kids, about our life together, she pleaded, her tone softening for a moment as if trying to reach the person she once loved. I shook my head slowly, the ache in my heart mingling with a deep sense of clarity. Our life together has been a series of deceptions, Lauren. I can't continue living in a house where my worth is constantly undermined by your actions. For a long, charged moment, neither of us spoke as the gravity of my words filled the space between us. The silence was punctuated only by the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a car passing by. Finally, Lauren's expression hardened, and she tried one last time to lure me back. You're throwing everything away over a misunderstanding, she whispered, almost pleadingly. Please, Jake, don't do this. We can fix it if you just give me another chance. I took a slow, measured breath and shook my head. No, Lauren. I'm done with the excuses and the constant manipulation. I deserve a life where I'm valued, where truth isn't hidden behind false promises. Her eyes glistened with a mixture of fury and heartbreak as I reached for my coat, my decision final. I can't keep sacrificing my dignity for a relationship built on lies. I continued, my voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying the weight of years of silent suffering. With that, I walked to the door, pausing briefly in the dim hallway where our memories hung like faded photographs. I'm leaving, Lauren, I said quietly, each word echoing in the silent space. I turned one last time, and though her eyes pleaded for a different outcome, I stepped out into the cool night, the sound of the door closing behind me marking the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would no longer be defined by your deceit, but by the strength I've found in reclaiming my own life. In the days following my departure from our home, I found myself immersed in the daunting process of reclaiming my life through legal means. The bitter aftermath of that fateful night still haunted me, but I knew I had to face the challenge head-on if I ever hoped to rebuild my shattered identity. I began by gathering every piece of evidence I had meticulously collected over the months. Detailed logs of Lauren's secretive trips through the backyard gate, images captured by the motion-triggered cameras, and even records of neighborly observations that confirmed my growing suspicions. With this evidence bound together in a thick dossier, I sought out a reputable attorney known for his unwavering commitment to justice. Sitting in a small, cluttered office that smelled faintly of old paper and determination, I laid out the case before him. This is everything, I explained, my voice steady despite the undercurrent of pain. Every time Lauren claimed she was watering the garden, these cameras showed her meeting with a neighbor. I have proof, undeniable proof, of her betrayal. The attorney nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the documents with professional detachment. You have built a compelling case, Jake, he said, his tone both reassuring and pragmatic. We'll make sure the truth comes out in court. But be prepared. Lauren will fight this, and she'll try to paint you as the villain. I knew that all too well. In subsequent meetings, Lauren's own legal team attempted to twist the narrative, portraying me as an insecure husband overreacting to a harmless misunderstanding. In a tense meeting with the attorneys representing both sides, I was called to the stand to present my evidence. As I sat there, every detail of my journey, from the first suspicious glance to the final damning footage, seemed to converge into a single moment of truth. I trusted her, I declared, my voice resonating through the courtroom as I recounted how each lie and every act of betrayal chipped away at my self-worth. I supported our family, worked long nights, and sacrificed my own needs, all while her secret life unfolded right under my nose. The room fell into a heavy silence, punctuated only by the measured notes of my attorney's interjections. Lauren's legal team fired back, accusing me of fabricating evidence and exaggerating my claims, but the weight of my documentation left little room for doubt. These are not the ramblings of a bitter man, I stated firmly, glancing at the stack of printed photographs and time-stamped recordings. They are the incontrovertible facts of a relationship built on deception. My words, though raw with emotion, were met with nods of understanding from even some members of the opposing counsel, who recognized the gravity of the betrayal. In that charged atmosphere, the balance of power began to shift in my favor. The judge, a stern yet fair man with decades of experience, listened intently as I detailed the countless times I had been diminished and dismissed, each statement reinforcing the injustice I had endured. Outside the courtroom, whispers of support from friends and even sympathetic neighbors bolstered my resolve, affirming that the truth was on my side. With every session, every painstakingly presented piece of evidence, I felt a growing confidence that justice would prevail. The legal battle was just beginning, and I knew that the road ahead would be long and arduous. Yet, as I left the courthouse that day, the cool air filled with the promise of a fresh start, I understood that this fight was not only for the truth, but for the reclamation of my own dignity. I was no longer the silent, suffering husband. I had become a man determined to stand up for his rights. With the case now firmly underway, I carried with me the quiet assurance that every sacrifice, every sleepless night, had led me to this defining moment, a moment where the scales of justice were finally tipping in my favor. I moved into a modest apartment on a crisp morning, the chill in the air a refreshing reminder that every ending is the start of something new. The small space, bare but filled with potential, became my sanctuary, a place where I could finally piece together the shattered fragments of my identity. Every box I unpacked, every wall I painted, was a quiet affirmation that I was reclaiming my life. Mornings in my new home were spent brewing strong coffee and watching the sun slowly stretch its rays over the horizon, each ray a promise of renewed hope. I reconnected with my career as a firefighter, taking on new challenges with a vigor that had been smothered for too long. Work became more than a job. It was a lifeline, a reminder that my efforts had purpose and that I could stand tall even after the storms of betrayal. In the evenings, I embraced the role of an independent father, making time to read bedtime stories and share jokes with my kids. Their laughter filled the quiet corners of my apartment, replacing the echoes of loneliness with the warmth of family. I also found solace in revisiting old hobbies, picking up a guitar I hadn't touched in years, and learning to play again. The music, soft and reflective, helped me navigate the labyrinth of emotions that now define my days. Meanwhile, word began to spread around the neighborhood that Lauren's once perfect life was unraveling. I heard whispers from neighbors about her erratic behavior and the dwindling support from friends who had once admired her. It seemed that the facade she had so carefully maintained was crumbling under the weight of her own deceit. One afternoon, as I mowed the lawn of my new home, an old neighbor stopped by and said, "Jake, I'm really glad to see you doing well. It looks like leaving was the best decision you ever made." His words, sincere and comforting, resonated deep within me, reinforcing the belief that I was on the right path. At work, My superiors noticed a renewed determination in me. I was no longer the man burdened by silent suffering, but a leader ready to face any challenge head-on. My colleagues would often remark, "You've got a fire in you now, Jake." And those words, spoken with genuine admiration, helped heal wounds I hadn't even realized I carried. In quiet moments, as I sat alone on the balcony watching the city lights shimmer in the distance, I reflected on the painful journey that had brought me here. I remembered the humiliation, the betrayal, and the overwhelming loneliness that had defined my past, and I marveled at how far I'd come. I deserve this, I murmured to the night, feeling a surge of gratitude for the strength that had carried me through the darkest times. My days were now filled with small victories, a successful project at work, heartfelt conversations with my children, and even quiet moments of self-discovery when I'd sketched the skyline from my window. Each of these moments was a building block in a new life I was constructing, a life where my worth was defined by my actions and not by someone else's deceit. As the seasons changed, I noticed that my apartment was slowly transforming from a temporary shelter into a true home, a place of healing and growth. I reconnected with old friends, attended community events, and even began mentoring young firefighters, sharing the hard-won lessons of resilience and integrity. Every step I took affirmed that leaving had been the most courageous decision of my life. And though the scars of the past remained, they no longer dictated my future. Instead, they serve as a reminder of my strength and the unwavering resolve to never settle for a life defined by betrayal. I smiled softly to myself as I locked up one evening, the cool night air invigorating my spirit, confident that this fresh start was not just an escape from pain, but a bold leap into a future filled with promise and the quiet joy of rediscovered self-worth. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.